Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League's final season has concluded, and the results are somehow even worse than anything we'd endured to this point, Josh Brown. We're going to break this stuff down. Spoilers for the Arkhamverse and Suicide Squad's now entire story. But turns out the evil Justice League were clones all along.
You know what? I kind of, like many people, saw this retcon, I suppose, coming, and I was so in denial, and I didn't want it to be true, because I just feel like this little bow on the end of the Suicide Squad story, I mean, to many people, it will be a plus, because it means like you don't really have to take that story seriously anymore. It means that the characters that you like the Arkham version of Batman, are not really dead, but it just makes Suicide Squad a completely pointless endeavor in my mind, because it's like, you are not living up to your title then, are you? But then maybe it shouldn't have with a story like this anyway, because the story, even in the main game, was not good, Scott Tailford.
I want to bring a few more details in, and we'll get back to, just what purely just opinion-based, what a colossal waste of everyone's time this entire thing has been. Only in my opinion. We'll see what happens down in the comments. I want to see what you think of the whole thing. But I can't fathom the human cost of this, genuinely.
I know what you mean, yeah.
On the development side, the art department, the creative side, the length of time it was in development, the fact that Rocksteady are a shell of their former selves. They've had a whole bunch of layoffs. I'm going to get back to that stuff because of how much the game bombed. And if you think of the money side of it, it lost Warner Brothers $200 million, and it's ridiculous. So, like I said, they're clones all along. People who were playing Suicide Squad to this point already cottoned onto that, because there were two other characters, Flash and Green Lantern, that you saved, that you found they were ostensibly clones for them, but I don't think they'd spelt it out as much as this. Whereas in this final one, the final scene to Kill the Justice League comes across in a motion comic cutscene with Harley Quinn doing the voiceover. The only go-to assumption is that Rocksteady, like I said, are a shell of their former selves, aren't able to devote the necessary funds to do a proper cinematic cutscene, 3D motion capture, or whatever it is. Harley even does the voices for Batman and Superman, which I thought that was pretty terrible. Whatever. And so, like you said, well, to throw in the specifics, all told, Arkhamverse Batman didn't die, even though there was that really controversial scene at the end, last year that everyone got hung up on in terms of the way that they were potentially handling Kevin Conroy's final performance. You've got all that stuff. Everything about the Arkhamverse can now just continue as if nothing happened. Actual Wonder Woman is dead, though, because she was never turned in the first place. She gets killed by the now cloned Superman. So at least when we're talking about Arkhamverse versions of these characters, which in theory, and oh my God, this stuff is exhausting, in theory, there's going to be one unified timeline going forward. According to Warner Brothers, it was all going to be one version of a character, one version of a mythos going forward. But the Wonder Woman game is still in production from Monolith, another Warner Brothers studio. However, I wanted to throw in that regard, last June in 2024, Kind of Funny's Greg Miller saying he was talking to members of Monolith about how much of an absolute fire that game's development is. Referred to it as being troubled, and said he wouldn't be surprised if the studio got shut down. He said, WTF do Warner Brothers even want to do with these characters?
Wow, okay.
Greg Miller, not someone to go in on stuff, but very much was quite clear about that. We'll get back to the Suicide Squad stuff, but thoughts on all this so far?
Much to consider here, Scott. I mean, I can't believe that I can believe because of the reception of Suicide Squad, but I can't believe that they gave the Brainiac and the cloned superheroes of this story the Poochie died on the way to his home planet treatment, and just said, don't worry about it. It's actually so sound. They were just clones. The 13 Brainiacs are dead. Don't worry about it.
There's a line
under the rug.
There's a line in here as well where Harley says, it's in Batman's voice, that like, the criminals, the Suicide Squad, did well following his plan. So his plan was to get captured and then cloned, and for loads of loads of those people to die. And for all this to play out, that's standard, that little one-line thing of, it's always Batman's plan, as if that's going to do right by everything.
Look, I get it. Like you said there have been reports. I think there was a Bloomberg report last year where I think it was Jason Schreier said that this team, the Rocksteady team, obviously this is not how they planned to release these 4 seasons of story updates. They probably would not have envisioned when they set out creating Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, to end the entire thing on this motion comic in such a fashion like this, just quickly wrapping up plot points. But this is the risk that you take, right? When you go in on a live service, that roadmap that you have on day one is never locked in place, or at least is never guaranteed to come to fruition the way that you might have wanted it to if you're a developer. We've seen that time and time again. You look at something like Anthem with Anthem 2.0, that was promised to be coming, and then they decided to scrap it. We've seen so many examples of a season pass eventually coming out because, you know, they have promised it. They need to deliver something. We knew there were going to be 4 seasons of Suicide Squad before the game even launched, so they need to deliver it in some form. But if the game doesn't sell day one, the publishers aren't going to want to put the money in to support it to the level that maybe was envisioned. However, that said, the way that Suicide Squad kills the Justice League ends before season 1, and you get all of that extra story stuff. That is Rocksteady seemingly firing on all cylinders with the amount of money that they needed to make that game. And that is bad as well. So I think even if this story was presented in the way that it was originally intended to, it still wouldn't have been good. Well, it just makes that original ending so much worse, and spoilers for that. But that game, it has some high points in terms of the cinematics, but the absolute dirt worst is the ending of it, where it is completely unfinished. It does just kind of render the stakes that have been built up previously null, and it sets you out on this live service quest to, again, track down those 13 brainiacs across different multiverses. So to have there not be a proper ending to the base game, and then to have the ending that wraps it all up in this post-release content be so bad, it kind of it makes the original, which was already pretty bad, like worse than it was.
Yeah, it's like you kind of need this extra content, and it literally is content. You need this extra gumph to go through to get something of a more positive finale. Because the actual note that it ends on, if you're a Suicide Squad fan, I guess is fun enough. Like the idea of the squad escaping Amanda Waller, commandeering a ship, going off into the Elseworlds, all these different universes or whatever, and that would be their sequel tag. But Amanda Waller gets to have Brainiac and the rest of that. Like there's a Harley says, "Oh, it's a happy ending for all," and it's like that would if Suicide Squad ever worked, I maintain this was never it.
Right.
In 2016, it was always Warner Brothers trying to have their Guardians of the Galaxy, and it never landed the right way. The 2016 movie was hacked to death. David Ayer's version hacked to death by the marketing department. That thing actually did do quite well at the box office, but then word of mouth was so sour, and then it took them forever. James Gunn's version, like, really, really bad. I want to throw in some of the history because you were mentioning, like, the original vision of the game and the reality of the development, and the Jason Schreier report. We do know from Bloomberg's Jason Schreier, which the report happened last year, talking to members of Rocksteady under anonymity, that development was an absolute mess with Warner Brothers higher-ups and even Rocksteady higher-ups, including Sefton Hill, who I think is one of the founders of Rocksteady, and Jamie Walker, who have now left Rocksteady. They left in the middle of this thing. Which when I did the report last year, I just referred to them as abandoning ship, which is one of the only ways that you can look at it, especially if you're a member of that team. Sefton Hill, Jamie Walker, but especially Sefton Hill is name dropped in the report as someone who just could not decide what the hell the game was supposed to be. Apparently he would be unavailable for weeks on end when members of different teams were looking to him to be like, what the hell are we supposed to be doing with this game? Alongside that, you had Warner Brothers executives thinking the game would be $1 billion IP, would be $1 billion franchise, $1 billion game. Obviously, that wasn't the case. To talk about Rocksteady overall, though, because I think a lot of the elephant in the room stuff is like, how do you go from Arkham Knight and then a 9-year wait and then Suicide Squad? They were working on a multiplayer game back in 2016. Apparently, once Arkham Knight was done, they wanted to do something different anyway. And a very early version of Suicide Squad was a more melee-based multiplayer game. But in 2016, they were working on something that was codenamed Stones. It wasn't the Suicide Squad game. It was just a multiplayer game. But then when the 2016 movie blew up, that then became the Suicide Squad game. Yeah. And then over time, it became this Arkhamverse tie-in or whatever, whilst there were all those pressures from Warner Brothers, the idea of focusing on DC and Batman, etc. So it just is one of those corporate cluster Fs that rolled out slowly for 9 years.
Yeah, it feels like everything went wrong for this project at every single stage of production. Like you said there, the idea of Warner Brothers wanting a Suicide Squad thing to release to gamers, that seems to have come first because we know that WB Montreal was originally working on a Suicide Squad game, then they were taken off it, then the property was given to Rocksteady, so it felt like they would just wanted a version of this because, like you said, they thought it was going to be this $1 billion thing, and I think it could have been if they, landed on a model and a style of gameplay that, fans actually liked, like they did with the Arkham games as well. And yeah, even internally from Rocksteady, I know that there were a lot of reports saying that, this live service thing wasn't forced on them, which For me personally, and this, I don't know anything deeper, but I find that to be probably technically true, but it's also, to me, on the same wavelength of crunch not being mandatory. It's like sort of an ultimatum in a way. It's sort of like a lose-lose situation. I imagine in just knowing what we know from Warner Brothers and their pursuit of these billion-dollar franchises and their pursuit of live service and their they're like champion of that recurring spend. I mean, they don't need to force a studio into doing something, but they can say, hey, yeah, you can make another single-player game that has these projections, but, you know, we're looking for this amount of revenue, and if you can't promise us that, you know, something... So who knows? We can't promise you anything to going forward. And I feel like that's how a lot of these decisions are ultimately made, where, you know, you give someone the... I'm just basing this off the Blizzard book, by the way, that Jason Schreier wrote, where there are a lot of similar conversations where you get the executives not outright saying, we need you to do this, but saying that, well, our projections for you are this, and you need to hit it however you want.
Yeah,
you
so how else are you going to get there?
Exactly. You need the developers end up just trying to do it because they're getting this pressure, even if it isn't like outright, we are in charge, you need to give us X product by X time.
Yeah, there was a whole thing last year as well where one of the members of Warner Brothers, I think it was someone Pereira, I forget the full name of that individual, but there was a press conference, a general sort of earnings conference statement thing. Very vague there, but you know what I mean? I did a whole report on it last year, but I just remember the quote about they want players to work and live in these different game worlds. And that's all about repeat monetization, trying to get you to spend over and over and over again. And it is that thing, and we talk about it all the time, about just how, you know, money blind a lot of corporate executive decisions are, or shareholder decisions, or just that idea of the fans will put up with it. Just design this set of frameworks, apply all the price tags, and the fans, these nebulous fans, will put up with anything, will get stuck in and make all the money over and over and over again. But yeah, like we said at the beginning, or you said at the beginning, there's that whole idea of like, what was this even for? If you do the clone angle, the only remote lasting thing of this is that Wonder Woman stays dead.
And you know what? I am actually pleased that they committed to that, at least, because for me, by far, the best part of the Suicide Squad story and game in general, it's those Wonder Woman moments. Like, for me, I said this in the review way back when, but every time Wonder Woman was on screen and she was, you know, grappling with Superman or what have you, I was just thinking, I want to be playing that game. That actually looks so fun. The stakes are clearly defined. The emotion is there. That battle between Wonder Woman and Superman, it's great.
Yeah, like former friends.
Yeah. Her death, it works. Like, that dramatic arc just feels like it should have been the focus. You should have been playing that. And it feels like while that is happening, you're the Suicide Squad doing all of the busy work, doing all of the crap tasks no one else wants to do. And that's kind of really frustrating. But yeah, overall, I mean, we're going forward, the rumors suggest that we're going to get a new Arkham game from Rocksteady. It's going to be a return to their roots. I don't even think they should acknowledge this overall. Just sweep it under the rug. You're already playing around with so many different multiverses and whatnot. You've now introduced clones. You've already, you know, made a situation where you can theoretically ignore it and say, actually, don't worry about it. We're picking up where we left off if they want to, or we're doing something brand new. You know, you've got multiverses there. So the idea of multiverses, by the way, not the game multiverses by Warner
Which
Brothers
also
as well.
bombed.
Yeah.
Also Warner Brothers bombed,
right?
The reality of the Wonder Woman stuff I think is interesting because again last year there was a hiring call put out for for the Wonder Woman game to work at Monolith. For someone that would know live service mechanics, it seems like the Wonder Woman game is also in itself going to have repeat monetization, which is the overall thing that Warner Brothers want. Again, can you take a pocket of Wonder Woman fans and repeatedly monetize them over and over again? But we've not seen anything of the Wonder Woman game in years now.
No.
And so it is that question, especially after this, of like, oh, is it meant to be the same one? Is it meant to be the same Diana? Does anyone even care? Like, oh my God, it's 2025.
It depends, man. I don't think there's anything wrong with still using these franchises, you know. I think they can't just expect people to buy a game because it is within a beloved franchise. Sorry, it's tripping over all of my words this morning. But you know, like a Wonder Woman game, that sounds cool. From Monolith, that sounds really cool. If they can incorporate some of the elements that they introduced in the Middle-earth games, excellent. That is another, for instance, series that I never thought I wanted. You know, did I want a new Middle-earth game that's an open-world Ubisoft-style title? I didn't think so, and then we got the Shadow of Mordor and we got the Nemesis system, and it was really, really good, better than anyone expected. So it's not the brand that I think I'm personally over. I'm just over the mismanagement of all of these different studios, because at this point, yes, okay, maybe there are issues internally with the developers themselves, but you look at Warner Brothers' slate and so much of it has just been outright mismanaged and outright bad. Like Arkham Origins is a great game, and Gotham Knights has its,
has its moments. God damn it!
Its moments, it really does.
Like
but you feel like that team that made Arkham Origins with Gotham Knights, they could have done something more. Why did that turn out the way that it did with all of its issues? Why did Rocksteady go from Arkham Knight to Suicide Squad? How is NetherRealm now in a situation where they have to just keep making Mortal Kombat games with increasingly dodgy monetization, and they can't even, live up to some of their promises that they made when they launched something like Mortal Kombat 1, right? Like, what's happening with all of these studios under WB?
Only bad. I forgot about how disastrous the Mortal Kombat stuff was. We did a report on that at the tail end of last year. That fact, the whole thing with WB being like, we're going to narrow it down to 4 pillars, like Harry Potter, DC / Batman, Game of Thrones, and
one more
that I'm blanking on. But the idea being that you would focus everything on these 4 key pillar franchises, and then run them into the ground. Mortal Kombat is in the worst state it's been since the entire thing almost went under at the end of the 2000s. But yeah, we can pretty much close the book on Suicide Squad. I'm sure there'll be more information comes out. I'm sure there'll be more workers, developers on the teams that get out there and say, look, you've got no idea how many ridiculous conversations we had trying to bring this thing together. But yeah, lost Warner Brothers $200 million. Rocksteady have sadly suffered multiple bouts of layoffs, including the leaving of some of the heads of the studio that in themselves were responsible for the Arkham trilogy in the first place, or the quadrilogy. And even Warner Brothers Montreal lost some staff as well, who were responsible for, they were like a support studio on Suicide Squad. But like you said, they were mainly responsible for Gotham Knights and Origins and stuff. So just, like I said, all around a colossal waste of everyone's time. I kind of can't believe it, but hopefully it's finally done.